Now here in the studio by James Forsyth of The Spectator, Rafael Behr of The New Statesman and Mark Pack of the political website Liberal Democrat Voice. James Forsyth, when George Osborne unveiled his budget in March, it all came horribly unstuck within days, didn't it? It unravelled rather embarrassingly. Is he on safer ground this time?
I think today's autumn statement is the antithesis of the March budget. Everything has been checked and double-checked. It's more politically cautious than the March budget was, and it also had political goodies in that we weren't expecting. The problem with them, one of the many problems with the March budget was that when George Osborne got up, all the good news had already leaked out. Today he had the cancelling of the 3p rise in fuel duty, the cut in corporation tax, and the increase in the personal allowance, all to announce on the day. These were all new news.
He also had austerity's going to last longer than I'd hoped. Debt isn't coming down as we'd hoped. We're missing our targets.
Yeah, I think he was playing a poor hand as well as he could. The economic numbers are bad, but I think the politics of this autumn statement for the Conservative Party are actually pretty decent. They've got Labour, as you heard with Chakramuna just then, are in a very difficult position on what to do about benefits. They're not sure whether to make the case that this is actually hitting people who are in work, people who are striving and trying to get on, or whether to accept what the polling numbers suggest, which is that this would be a very popular move. I think that George Osborne's reputation, certainly in the Conservative firmament tonight, is not quite back to where it was before the March budget, but it's definitely his share price has ticked up.
All right, well, Rafael Behr, let's look at Ed Balls' share price, because the consensus in Westminster today seemed to be that he didn't do terribly well. And it does seem that Labour have a problem because they aren't in a position to be able to say to people on benefits, don't worry, if you vote Labour, we'll get your benefits back up to where they were.
No, I think that's right. The consensus certainly seems to be that George Osborne sort of won the chamber, as it were, won the debate. And one of the ways he managed to do that was essentially wrong-footing the Shadow Chancellor on one of the big headline numbers. Just to pick up something James said, I mean, there was a bit of old-fashioned trickiness in there, because actually one of the ways the Chancellor managed to suggest that the deficit and the debt for this year won't be so bad is by shoving certain things in there, interest from quantitative easing, some money from the 4G spectrum.
People at least are saying that did come from the Office of Budget Responsibility. That wasn't just him.
Oh, absolutely. But he's found a way of booking it that makes it look good. But no, absolutely right. I think every time Labour face one of these big sort of macroeconomic spectacles, what they want to say is, we wouldn't be here if we'd had the chance to do something about it. But you can't fight a 2015 election saying, do you remember that growth you didn't have in the first years of the Parliament? Well, you would have had it under us. And that doesn't really help you very much. And so then the question arrives, well, what would you be doing differently once you accept that we are where we are and that the deficit and the debt still need to be dealt with? I do think on that crucial question of benefits and the 1% uprating, my instinct from speaking to people is that they will go on the line of actually a majority of this pain is going to be felt by people who are in work. There is a compassion threshold in the British public. It's not actually strategically true that you can just keep cutting and hurting people at the bottom of the income spectrum. At some stage, the public will recoil and say it's the same old nasty Tory party.
OK, now, Mark Pack, for the Lib Dems, this is all ghastly, isn't it? Because the longer austerity goes on, the more difficult it is to say to people, vote Lib Dem, will make it better, because you're not making it better.
Well, I think actually the autumn statement today was really rather good for the Liberal Democrats, because first of all...
Seriously?
Absolutely, because first of all, the party managed to see off this talk about 10 billion in welfare cuts and so on. There are obviously some very tough decisions in what's being made, but that sort of big push from the Tory right was successfully seen off. And one of those surprise rabbits from the hat, pulled out of the hat that was being referred to earlier, is an extra cut in the basic income tax allowance for everyone for next spring. And that's, another step towards what was one of the major headline policies the party fought the last general election on. And it means that...
This is no tax on below 10,000
Absolutely. And what it means is come April next year, there will be nearly 2.2 million people who have been taken out of paying income tax completely. And that's not people taxing, dodging tax at the rich end. It's 2.2 low-paid people taken out of tax because of that policy.
But of course, Vince Cable still hasn't got his mansion tax, has he?
No, absolutely. But I think, realistically, a mansion tax is something that can't be introduced overnight. Actually, the administration behind it makes it a longer term rather than a short term tax. So that's for the next general election manifesto debate, most likely.
So where then, James Forsyth, do you think today leaves our economic prospects? Clearly, things have not improved as quickly as the coalition would have liked them to do. But do you think they have real reason to cross their fingers and hope that by the time of the next election, it really will look better?
I think the next election is going to be another austerity election. It's going to be, in 2010, people thought that the next election, the Tories certainly wanted to fight the next election on a kind of Reaganite, it's morning in America again, why would we want to go back to where we were 5 short years ago? That's not going to be the case. We saw today the spending cuts go on until at least 2018. I think the big question for British politics is, do the British public want a party that says, yes, the austerity goes on, here's how we're going to get there? Or do they want someone who says, this is hurting, but it's not working, let's change? And I think you see one of the dynamics that I think George Osborne hopes is in his favour is that this is a coalition. So although the Lib Dems might have a different way to get to the same numbers as the Tories at the next election, they are still bound in to that same fiscal envelope that the Conservatives are. And that puts Labour in a difficult position. If they deviate, Osborne will say, well, are you going to borrow more? We know how that ended up last time. Or are you going to tax more? And I think you're seeing those dynamics here. And I think that on Raf's point about welfare, I think that Osborne is relying on the Liberal Democrat shield from saying this isn't the same nasty party. Look, Vince Cable can agree to this. He's a man who used to advise John Smith.
Right, the Liberal Democrat strategy has baked into it the idea of reinforcing the Conservatives as the nasty party so that they can present themselves as the conscience of the coalition. Yes, the Lib Dems will fight an election saying you don't want to see some of the horrendous things these people were planning to do if we hadn't been there to stop them.
There's another thing for Labour, though, Rafael Behr. I mean, they've been mocking for months now the David Cameron, George Osborne line, we're all in this together. But if you look at the graphs that accompanied today's statement, it does make clear that people at the higher end of the income spectrum are being hit pretty much as hard as the people at the lower end. And that does enable the government to say, look, we are doing what we said we're doing. We're making sure that the pain is spread across.
Yeah, that the distributional impact graph, as it's called in the jargon, is quite interesting because, as you say, it shows that at the very top people are contributing a lot, but also at the bottom and the lower half people are paying a lot. Now, I think what matters in an election, or will matter a lot in the election, is how much that reflects, how much of that is a proportion of your income. So I think the danger for the Tories is that they will turn around. You're bound to have some growth in 2015. And they'll say, look, it is actually working. Stick with us. It would be madness to go back now. We've got growth. We've turned the corner. And people will turn around and say, well, it's working for you, chum. But actually, my wages haven't grown since 2000. I'm still feeling pretty poor. And I don't really see these green shoots that you keep telling me about.
And it leaves the Lib Dems, Mark Pack, still really with only one message come the next election. You think it's been bad, it would have been worse without us.
Absolutely. I think that will be a large part of the Liberal Democrat message. I think there will be things to point to say not only, is this sort of an abstract point, but like the income tax allowance, but also other important policies, things like the Green Investment Bank, things like the People Premium, to be able to show on a range of different public services that there's been a real Liberal Democrat impact on making the policies particularly better for the least well off. I mean, that's exactly what the People Premium does, is it focuses extra financial help for some of the kids who are most in need of that in our schools.
And do you believe that Liberal Democrat activists will believe the party leadership when they're told we are making a difference?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think the big debate in the party is about whether we're making enough of a difference in coalition, but there's very little debate in the party about whether being in coalition or not is the right thing. That, there's overwhelming agreement that being in coalition is the right thing. It's how do we make as much out of it as possible.
We're exactly halfway through the term of this government, if all goes according to plan. 2.5 years to go. We'll leave it there for now. Mark Pack, Rafael Behr, James Forsyth, thank you all very much indeed.